I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Okay. I am very fortunate that I grew up in the 1980s. It was a great era to grow up in because you had cable television emerging with ESPN becoming a household name. MTV was awesome because back then they actually played videos on MTV, unlike the crap you see now. Back then, you also too had the technology advancement of computers and how they were starting to become a force in the household and in the workplace as well. Sports, though, were also just as revolutionary in the 1980s, and college basketball might have been the most because college basketball was changing, and you saw the adaptation of the March Madness basketball tournament, moving from 48 teams to 64. You also saw changes within the game itself, a 45-second shot clock. Hard to believe that before the 1985-86 season, there was no shot clock. And then the next year, we got the adaptation of the three-point shot as well. But during the 1980s, as Sooner fans, we relished something very special. Billy Ball. Billy Tubbs, no question, made college basketball fun with the high-scoring, fast pace. In fact, they didn't even need the shot clock back then. The Sooners didn't. The Sooners won a crap load of games, and there were times where they won by big margins because of Billy Ball. Again, it was fast-paced. It was high-scoring. It was slam dunk time. Defensively, they pressed the hell out of you, forcing turnovers. And for the Sooners, scoring over 100 points a game was not an uncommon thing. And we're going to talk about 1988 in a little bit because that was a very special year for Sooner Nation. Billy Tubbs passed away just recently. Over the weekend, at the age of 85 years old, he was admitted to a hospice care just prior to that, but had health problems throughout the final few years. In fact, probably according to the doctors, lived longer than expected. But Billy Tubbs passes away. There should, and by the way, there should have been something named after Billy Tubbs at the Lloyd Noble Center or statue because during Billy Tubbs' coaching era, which was from the early 80s to the mid-90s, in Norman, Tubbs' teams put up fantastic numbers, lots of wins, and we're talking about 8 straight appearances in the NCAA tournament, 9 overall, 3 Sweet 16s, 2 Elite 8s, and of course the national championship game 32 years ago. Hard to believe it's been that long. But Billy Ball was the happening thing in front of packed crowds at the Lloyd Noble Center. It was hard to get a seat back then in the 1980s at the Lloyd Noble Center. They had a massive home winning streak from the late 80s to the early 90s. Billy Tubbs' teams knew how to wear teams out. And like I said, scoring over 100 points per game for the Sooners was not an uncommon thing. They would, have fantastic rivalries, of course, in the Big 8 Conference with Oklahoma State, with Missouri, and, of course, the Kansas Jayhawks, which we'll discuss later. During the Billy Tubbs era, he also, too, produced great talent as well with the players like Chew Kennedy, of course, Skeeter Henry, William Davis, Brent Price, the greatest Sooner basketball player of all, rest in peace to Wayman Tisdale. But it was that 1988 team that was special for Billy Tubbs and the Sooners. That team, which saw the number 1 ranking more than once that particular season, was the number 1 seed in the Southeast region, beating Auburn, Louisville, and then in the regional final, taking care of Villanova, coming from behind to win that game, setting up the Final Four in which they played, Arizona, in which a lot of people, including me, thought that was going to be for the national championship, even though it was a semifinal game. Arizona had an All-American named Sean Elliott. They had Anthony Cook. They also had Steve Kerr. That's right, Steve Kerr played for Arizona. But Oklahoma took care of business, won the game by 8 points. 2 nights later, it took a great effort by Danny Manning, the College Basketball National Player of the Year for Kansas. Danny and the Miracles, as Dick Vitale called them time and time again, pulled off the upset that night against Oklahoma. But still, that Oklahoma team was outstanding. In fact, they scored over 4,000 points that particular season. That is still an NCAA record for 1 year as far as scoring. In my opinion, it's never going to even be approached again. Yeah, it's still a heartbreaker to think about that season. But again, that team was special with all the great things that they accomplished. And when you look at college basketball now, you don't get that same type of play. You just don't. And of course, at the even before coronavirus, even at the Lloyd Noble Center, you still don't get that environment. You still don't get that feel. Billy Tubbs wasn't just great because of his coaching, because of the players that he developed. We talked about the 88 team, how special they were. The backcourt of Ricky Grace and Mookie Blaylock, the front court of Dave Seeger, as well as All-American Stacey King and Harvey Grant. But we're talking about, a coach in Billy Tubbs that was extremely friendly. I had a chance to meet him back in 1993, and one outstanding person. It was fun to have a conversation with him. Billy Tubbs, we remember, back in the late 80s, the famous scene at the Lloyd Noble Center against Missouri. Oklahoma's trailing in the game. Things aren't going very well for them because, they just aren't in sync yet. Tubbs basically not happy with the way the game's going because, fans were throwing things on the court. Tubbs grabs the PA microphone and tells the crowd, regardless of how terrible the officiating is, please do not throw things in the court. Tubbs got a technical foul, but the Sooners got a boost from that and ended up winning the game. Tubbs, another fun story about Billy Tubbs I want to share too, is one that I heard just recently. This was during his early days at the University of Oklahoma. Entering a particular basketball season, Iowa State coach Johnny Orr, asked Tubbs, he said, "You guys looking forward to this year?" Tubbs says, I'm not so sure. I don't think we're going to be that good. Orr said, "What are you talking about? All 5 of your returning starters are back." And Tubbs says, yeah, they're back. I don't want 5 returning starters. I want 5 new ones. Proof that, sometimes, if you're not playing your best ball, if you have all your returning starters back, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you do need some new ammunition. But again, Billy Tubbs, 9 appearances in the NCAA tournament, and 8 of those were in consecutive fashion. And by the way, he would later coach at TCU and led them to an NCAA tournament appearance as well. But there needs to be some sort of a tribute, a statue, name the court after the guy or both. Because, I know Kelvin Sampson did some terrific things with Oklahoma, got them to a Final Four, and Kruger got the Sooners to a Final Four, back in 2016. But basketball in Norman was never as exciting, it was never as successful, and never as much fun to watch as it was with Coach Billy Tubbs. It wasn't conventional basketball where you take as much time off the shot clock as you could, or before the shot clock era, just play slow down ball. Billy Tubbs did not do that at all. He was one hell of a coach, and also, one hell of a person. He's going to be big time missed. Billy Tubbs, thank you for making the 1980s a very fun era of college basketball to watch.